a full food storage. But your family can still face food shortages when you make a mistake that seems very small. It may sound illogical, but this happens very often. In this video, I will share 10 things that longtime food storage experts know very well, but beginners often do not realize. Every year, many people try to build a food reserve. They buy rice, buy canned goods, buy dry foods, and fill their shelves with the feeling that they have finished preparing. But a few years later, when they open their storage, many people discover something very uncomfortable. Some of the food has spoiled, some has lost nutrition, and some things still look fine, but actually no longer have any real value. Not because they bought the wrong food, but because they stored it the wrong way. And there is one factor many people overlook. Item number 6 in this list. Something that can ruin an entire food reserve if you do not know how to handle it. Let's start with the first thing. Start with 10. Not every food is suitable for long-term storage. The most common mistake beginners make when stockpiling food is thinking that they only need to buy a lot of food and store it away, and over time, it will remain fine. But long-term food storage is not about filling kitchen shelves. It is about choosing the right foods that can survive over time. In the world of long-term storage, foods are not the same. Some can last for decades. Some begin to spoil after only a few years. Many people, when they first begin, often buy familiar things from the supermarket. Rice, flour, cereals, nuts. They look at the expiration date on the package and believe that everything can be stored for a long time. But the expiration date on the package is not the true lifespan of food. It is only a point for the manufacturer to guarantee quality. Food can change a lot after that point. The taste changes, the texture changes, and sometimes an entire batch of food becomes useless. A very clear example is rice. White rice, when stored dry, sealed, and protected from light, can last 25 to 30 years. That is why it becomes the foundation of many emergency food reserves around the world. But brown rice is completely different. The bran layer of brown rice contains natural oils. At first, this makes it more nutritious. But over time, that oil oxidizes. The rice begins to smell. Then gradually, it is no longer edible. One person once shared that they bought a large amount of brown rice during the pandemic because they thought it was a healthier choice. 2 years later, when they opened their storage to check, the smell of rancid oil spread out as soon as the first bag was opened. Dozens of bags of rice eventually had to be thrown away. Not because there was a lack of food, but because the original choice was wrong. That is what experienced people always understand. Stockpiling food is not about buying a lot. Stockpiling means understanding which types truly last over time. Because in long-term storage, food rarely disappears because it was eaten. It disappears because it spoils. And the worst moment is not when the kitchen shelf is empty, but when you open your storage and realize that most of what you once trusted is no longer usable. 9. The 3 biggest enemies of food. If the previous section talked about choosing the right foods to stockpile, the next step that experienced people always emphasize lies in something else: the environment where food is kept over time. Because in long-term storage, food rarely spoils simply because it has been stored for a long time. Most of the time, it spoils because of the things around it. Long-time food storage practitioners often mention the 3 biggest enemies of food: air, moisture, and light. These 3 factors do not cause immediate changes. They do not destroy food in a day or a week, but they work slowly, almost invisibly. Month by month and year by year, they quietly weaken the structure of the food. Air carries oxygen and oxygen drives the process of oxidation. When the natural fats in food are exposed to oxygen for long periods, the flavor begins to change. Quality gradually declines, and eventually the food becomes rancid. Moisture creates another danger. Even a small amount of moisture entering the packaging can completely change the environment inside. Mold, bacteria, and biological reactions begin to appear. Light is not harmless either. Strong light, especially direct sunlight, can break down vitamins and gradually reduce the nutritional value of food over time. Many people have experienced a very familiar moment when reopening a food storage after several years. They expect dry, loose, and clean grains of rice just like the first day. But instead, they find blocks of rice clumped together because moisture had entered long before. A strange smell begins to appear, and the entire container of food has to be thrown away. Not because there was a lack of food, but because the storage environment had already been compromised. That is why experienced people do not only focus on buying food, they focus on controlling the environment around the food. Mylar bags help block light. Oxygen absorbers remove the remaining oxygen inside the packaging. Sealed containers help prevent moisture and insects. These tools are not minor details in food storage. They are the defensive layer that allows food to remain stable for many years. Because in long-term storage, food is rarely destroyed by time. It is destroyed by small factors that people cannot see. And sometimes an entire storage can fail. Not because you prepared too little, but because those three silent enemies were allowed to remain for too long. Have you ever opened an old bag of rice and discovered a strange smell or insects? 8. Packaging is more important than many people think. After understanding the environment and the factors that can destroy food over time, experienced people often realize something else that beginners easily overlook. Packaging. Many people, when they begin stockpiling, still keep food in the original packaging from the supermarket. It seems reasonable because the food is already packaged and looks completely normal. But retail packaging was never designed to preserve food for many years. Supermarket packaging mainly serves three purposes: transportation, display, and short-term use. Many types of thin plastic bags or paper packaging still allow air and moisture to slowly penetrate inside. In the first few weeks or months, this change is almost impossible to notice. But over time, the environment inside the packaging begins to change, and the food begins to lose quality. History showed this long ago. In the early 19th century, Napoleon's army faced a major problem: how to preserve food for soldiers during long campaigns. A French chef named Nicolas Appert developed a method of preserving food by placing it in sealed containers and heating them to remove air. That method later became the foundation of the modern canned food industry. The important point is that the food itself did not change. The way packaging protected the food is what changed everything. Today, that principle remains exactly the same. When dry food is transferred into airtight Mylar bags, combined with oxygen absorbers and placed in sealed containers, the environment inside is almost isolated from the outside air. Air is reduced, light is blocked, and moisture has difficulty entering. In long-term storage, packaging is not a small detail. It is the first defensive layer of food, and sometimes the difference between a reserve that lasts for decades and a food storage that quickly degrades lies only in the packaging that was chosen from the beginning. 7. Temperature is a factor few people notice after discussing packaging and the storage environment. There is another factor often overlooked in long-term food storage: temperature. Many people believe that as long as food is well packaged and placed in sealed containers, it will last for a very long time. But in reality, temperature is the factor that quietly determines the speed of food deterioration. A simple rule that many food preservation experts apply is, every time the temperature increases by about 10 degrees Celsius, the lifespan of food can decrease by nearly half. This means that a type of food that can last 20 years in a cool environment may last only about 10 years if stored in a warmer environment. A famous example in history comes from the Antarctic expedition of Robert Falcon Scott in 1912. During this journey, the explorers left several food supply depots on the ice. Many years later, some of these depots were found almost intact in the frozen environment. The extremely low temperature slowed nearly every process of decomposition. The food was not quickly destroyed because the cold environment kept it stable for a very long time. This shows an important truth. Temperature can completely change the lifespan of food. In a cold and stable environment, oxidation, decomposition, and nutrient loss occur much more slowly. But in a hot environment, every chemical reaction happens faster. Fats oxidize faster. Vitamins decline faster. And the structure of food gradually changes. That is why long-time food storage practitioners always choose cool, dry, and stable places to store their food reserves. They avoid places with strong temperature fluctuations, such as hot garages, attics, or areas exposed to direct sunlight. A food reserve can be packaged perfectly. The packaging can be sealed. The environment can be dry. But if it is placed in a location that is too hot, temperature will quietly shorten the lifespan of everything inside. And sometimes the difference between a food reserve that lasts for decades and one that quickly deteriorates is not the food, and it is not the packaging. It is the temperature of the room where the food reserve is stored. Where is your food reserve currently placed? A storage room, the kitchen, or the attic? 6. Insects always exist after discussing temperature and the storage environment. There is another factor that many beginners often do not think about. Insects. When looking at a bag of rice, a sack of beans, or a box of dry cereal, everything usually appears completely clean. There are no signs of spoilage. Nothing is moving. And because of that, many people believe the food inside is completely safe for long-term storage. But in reality, many types of grains and dry beans may contain extremely small insect eggs that cannot be seen with the naked eye. These eggs do not cause problems immediately. They can remain dormant in the food for a long period of time. But when environmental conditions become suitable, they can hatch and begin destroying the food from the inside. The history of grain storage has shown this for a very long time. In the 19th century, when large grain warehouses began to appear in Europe and North America, a small insect called Sitophilus granarius, also known as the grain weevil, caused serious damage. Grain stores that seemed completely stable could lose a large portion of their supply in only a few months because the weevils developed inside the kernels. The problem was not that the grain storage was dirty. The problem was that insect eggs already existed inside the grain before it was stored. That is why long-time food storage practitioners often add one small step before long-term packaging. Freezing dry foods for a few days. Cold temperatures help kill insect eggs that may exist inside grains or beans. After that, the food is transferred into long-term storage packaging. This is not a complicated step. It is simply a small precaution before food is stored away for many years. But experience shows that this small step can prevent a major problem later. Because in long-term storage, the destroyer of a food reserve is not always time, temperature, or the environment. Sometimes it is the tiny organisms that were already present in the food, simply waiting for the right moment to begin their activity. 5. Stored food must be food you actually eat after discussing insects, temperature, and packaging. There is another mistake that is less technical but happens very often in food storage: storing foods that you are not truly used to eating. When people begin preparing for long-term situations, many often buy foods that they hear are good for storage. These may be unfamiliar grains, less common dry foods, or items they have never cooked before. At first, this seems reasonable, but when the time comes to actually use them, many people realize that they do not know how to cook those foods, or simply that their family does not like eating them. The result is that foods bought with the intention of long-term storage remain sitting on the shelf for many years without ever being used. The history of many expeditions also shows this. During Ernest Shackleton's Antarctic expedition in 1914, the expedition team carried foods they were already familiar with. Foods such as hard biscuits, canned meat, and simple grains were chosen not only because they were durable, but also because the crew had already been accustomed to them in everyday life. In a harsh environment, using familiar foods made meal preparation faster and more stable. This principle remains true in food storage today. Experienced people usually store foods that their families already use regularly. When a type of food is already part of everyday meals, rotating and replacing it becomes very natural. Older food is gradually used, and new food is added to the reserve. Because in long-term storage, food does not only need to last. It also needs to be something you know how to cook and are willing to eat when necessary. How many items in your storage are actually foods your family eats every week? 4. Rotating food. A good food storage is not a storage that is closed and forgotten for many years. In fact, reserves like that are often the ones most likely to face problems. Food may still look fine from the outside, but over time its quality gradually declines without the person storing it realizing. That is why experienced people do not see food storage as a place for long-term keeping, but as a system that is always operating and continuously rotating. The simplest principle they apply is first in, first out. The food placed into storage first is used first. When new food is added, it is placed behind or below, so that older foods are always taken first for daily meals. This method helps keep the food storage constantly refreshed without creating waste. The principle of rotating food is actually not new. In large grain warehouses and military logistics systems, this method has been used for a long time to ensure that food is always used while it is still at its best quality. If food is only stored and never checked or used, the risk of deterioration over time increases greatly. When food storage is rotated regularly, the person storing it always knows exactly what is in the reserve. Older food is used in everyday meals, and new food is added to the position behind it. This helps the storage system remain stable while reducing the risk of having to throw away foods that have passed their expiration date. Because in long-term storage, a good food reserve is not the one that is the fullest. A good food reserve is one that is always used, checked, and renewed over time. 3. Nutrition is just as important as quantity. Many food storages look very full, but the bodies of the people using them gradually weaken over time. The reason usually does not lie in the quantity of food, but in the nutritional quality inside it. Beginners in food storage often think in a very simple way. As long as there are enough calories, it is enough. Rice, noodles, flour, and other dry starches seem able to solve every problem. They are cheap, easy to buy, and last a long time. But the human body does not function on energy alone. It needs vitamins, minerals, and protein to maintain the immune system, rebuild cells, and keep muscles working normally. A food storage based only on starch may help you survive in the short term, but when time stretches longer, the real problems begin to appear. History has proven this very clearly. In 1747, the Scottish physician James Lind, working in the British Royal Navy, observed that many sailors on ships became exhausted after many weeks at sea. They did not lack food. Supplies were still available: hard biscuits, salted meat, and grains. Calories were completely sufficient. But the sailors began to bleed from their gums. Their bodies grew weaker and wounds did not heal. This was scurvy, a disease caused by a lack of vitamin C. James Lind tested giving a group of sailors oranges and lemons. After only a few days, those men began to recover, while the others continued to weaken. This discovery later completely changed the way long sea voyages prepared their food. The lesson from history is very simple. A food storage may keep you full, but it does not always keep the body healthy. Experienced people who store food understand this very clearly. They do not only ask how many calories are in this storage, they ask a more important question. What will the body actually receive from these foods after many months or many years? Because in the long term, a food storage that is only enough to survive may not be enough to maintain health. If you could keep only 3 foods for a long-term food reserve, what would you choose? 2. Diversifying food. One of the most common mistakes when beginning food storage is buying a lot, but only a few types. Many people choose one familiar food, rice, noodles, or a type of bean, and then buy a large quantity because they think that as long as there are enough calories, they can survive for a long time. But people who have stored food for many years understand that a food reserve based on only a few similar foods is actually very fragile. If an entire storage revolves around a single grain, just one small problem can cause that system to collapse. Insects, mold, or unstable storage conditions can affect the entire reserve at the same time. And even if the food is still edible, repeating only one meal for a long period can quickly weaken both the body and the mind. The human body needs different nutritional groups to maintain long-term health. Experienced people who store food usually build their reserves in a different way. Instead of focusing on one source, they diversify. A balanced food reserve usually includes several different groups: grains, beans, fats, canned foods, dry foods, and additional sources of nutrition. Each group plays its own role, helping the storage system remain more stable over time. The history of exploration also shows the importance of this. In 1911, the Norwegian explorer Roald Amundsen carried out his expedition to reach the South Pole. His team did not bring only one type of food. They prepared a diversified food system that included dried meat, animal fat, grains, powdered milk, and chocolate. This balance helped the expedition maintain energy and health in the harshest conditions on the planet, and eventually become the first people to reach the South Pole. The lesson from long-term storage systems is very clear. Beginners often ask, "What should I buy a lot of?" But experienced people ask a different question if one food faces a problem. What other options do I still have? Because in the long term, a strong food reserve is not the one that has the most of one thing, but the one that has enough choices to continue operating when one item suddenly disappears. 1. Stockpiling food is not shopping. The biggest mistake beginners make when starting food storage is thinking that this is simply a large shopping trip. They imagine preparing food the same way as a day at the supermarket, buying a lot, filling the cart, then bringing everything home and storing it away. But people who have stored food for many years understand that this way of thinking almost always leads to failure. Stockpiling food is not a sudden action. It is a long-term process, similar to building a system. A sustainable food reserve is not only made of the things you buy today, but also how you store them, rotate them, and replenish them over time. If you only buy once and then forget about it, that food reserve will quickly become a pile of expired food that no one uses. Many food reserve systems in history also worked according to this principle. For centuries, agricultural communities maintained their grain reserves by replenishing them after each harvest season, while gradually using older supplies throughout the year. This created a stable cycle. Food was replaced before its quality declined, and the reserve was always kept ready. Experienced people who store food often do something similar on a household scale. They do not try to build a huge food reserve in a single day. Instead, they add one item at a time, each week or each month. Every small shopping trip contributes to expanding the storage system. Over time, the food reserve gradually forms in a natural and sustainable way. This approach also helps avoid a common problem: buying too much of things that are not truly needed. When food storage becomes a long-term habit, you gradually understand which foods your family actually uses, and the reserve will reflect those familiar meals. Therefore, stockpiling food is not an event that happens in a single day. It is a habit that is built over time, and the most stable food reserves are always formed slowly, one step at a time. In your opinion, which mistake in this list is the most likely to happen? People who have stored food for many years do not have better reserves because they buy more. They have better reserves because they understand how food survives over time. A bag of rice, a can of beans, or a sack of grain is not only food. They are part of a preservation system. And in that system, sometimes just one small change, such as a more stable temperature, tighter packaging, or a more organized arrangement, can extend the lifespan of food for many years. That is why two food reserves can look the same. But after many years, one storage is still usable, while the other contains only food that must be thrown away. If you are building a food reserve for your family, share in the comments. Which food are you storing the most of? And if you want to learn more about how to store food properly, press like and subscribe to the channel. Because in the next video, we will talk about foods that can last for decades if they are stored correctly.